The United States could not have accomplished the concept of a total war without the help of women. During World War I, women not only were needed to manage all the jobs that were left behind by the men in the war, yet volunteered in several other ways as well. The women were enthusiastic about the war effort and were eventually awarded with their right to vote. It is safe to say most women were involved in the war effort, which contributed to a total war in the United States. First, while men were fighting in the wars, several jobs back at home were abandoned, which had to be filled in by women just to keep a community running. Women were only considered to be temporary substitutes, however. For instance, 15,000 women took on the role of farmers. To add, some became police and streetcar operators, although roles like this were rare. Propaganda was used early in the war to earn their support, and was successful. They would preserve foods, minimize waste, and sometimes encourage their sons to enlist in their army. They helped in several other ways as well, sometimes even within the Army or Navy. For instance, a major way women helped in the military was through medical roles. Even without equal pay or recognition in comparison to the men, 31,500 women worked as nurses in the Army or Navy Nurse Corps, 200 of which served in the country. Eventually, women would take on an array of crucial medical roles, working as dietitians, physical therapists, relief workers, and aides. At one point, about 11,000 women were enlisted by the Navy as well. These women served in trading stations and Navy yards all across the nation and took on important clerical roles. They also served as telephone operators, fingerprint experts, cable decoders, and translators. This woman here is writing a letter for this injured soldier. If it weren't for women, America would have been on a serious shortage of supplies in World War I. Many women worked in munition factories that directly supplied the war effort. This was important because previously, immigration had been closed off, creating a serious shortage of workers in the munition industry. They sometimes even worked in torpedo plants. To add, many were already working in the textile industry, which aided in making uniforms. 9.4 million women worked in war-related industries. There were at least 8 million women who labored without machinery to make medical and clothing supplies for soldiers. Many more American women had volunteered with unexpected enthusiasm in organizations such as the Salvation Army and Red Cross. They took on several other jobs than previously mentioned. Some worked in canteens supplying food for soldiers, while others provided transportation as drivers. The large majority of women supported the war, but this doesn't necessarily mean all of them did. Some women actually counteracted the total war effort concept, especially towards the beginning or before the war. Jane Addams, for instance, led the International Congress of Women for Permanent Peace. However, their efforts were not very successful, as the president later promised World War I would be a, quote, war to end all wars. Before the war, the suffrage movement was in full swing. However, many women felt it was their duty to focus and support the war when it came along. After the war, with the amount of work and volunteering women enthusiastically took on, it is not surprising they had convinced many that they were neither weak nor unpatriotic. This led to great advancements in the suffrage movement. After the war, for instance, President Woodrow Wilson was convinced that the responsibilities women had shouldered during the war entitled them to full rights as citizens. He stated, "We have made partners of the women in this war. Shall we admit them only to a partnership of suffering and sacrifice and toil, and not to a partnership of privilege and right?" Women's efforts in the war, although thought to be just temporary, were a large factor in the passing of the 19th Amendment, which granted women the right to vote. In 1919, the House of Representatives passed the amendment, which was ratified in 1920. The adoption of this amendment marks the success of the suffrage movement caused by World War I. In conclusion, women played a significant role in supporting the U.S. during World War I. As men left to fight in the war, there were many abandoned jobs that women took on temporarily in order to keep the country functioning. Also, there were several women who volunteered to help out in the war directly by working as, for example, army nurses and telephone operators. While some pacifists may have opposed the war, counteracting the total war ideology, most women in America participated in various jobs or tasks throughout the war, contributing to a total war effort. This participation was so important that it proved their worth and granted them the right to vote.